I built the voice AI that made this company billions. Then one morning, I heard it speak in someone else's demo, claiming he created it. It was my voice, my code, but his name on the patent. They didn't just steal my work, they stole me. Now I'm the guy under internal investigation while the CEO's golden nephew gets promoted. But what they don't know is I've been building something they can't see. And this time, when my voice speaks, it'll bring them all down. 10 years. 10 years of silent work, lines of code, sleepless nights, and endless test cycles. My name is Darren Locke, and I've spent a decade crafting the foundation of the company's voice cloning AI, an intricate system designed to replicate human tone with chilling accuracy. I wasn't the type who stood on stage or spoke up in meetings. I preferred to build, to refine, to get things right. My world was code, not politics. And in this company, that made me invisible. So when I sat in the back of the auditorium during the company's quarterly demo and heard my own voice speaking from the stage, I froze. The voice was smooth, confident, eerily familiar. The cadence, the tone, the slight rasp on certain syllables, it was mine. But the man standing proudly beside the projected waveform wasn't me. It was Kyle Ramsey. He smiled, soaking in the applause. "What you're hearing is a new model I trained over the past 6 months," he said. "It adapts to tonal shifts with unmatched precision." He never once mentioned my name. No acknowledgement. No credit. My stomach turned. I scanned the room. No one looked surprised. In fact, they looked impressed. Someone clapped a little too enthusiastically behind me. That voice, that model, it wasn't just similar to mine. It was my demo, my data. I knew every parameter, every audio frame. He hadn't trained anything. He'd stolen it. Later that night, I walked into the house as quietly as I could. The hallway was dark. The hum of the fridge, the only sound. On the dining table sat a plate of reheated pasta, untouched. From the living room, I heard my wife's voice. "You missed dinner again?" she called without looking. She was folding laundry, her back turned. "I'm sorry," I murmured, setting my bag down. "Ellie asked about you," she added, her tone softening. "She said she misses you. But then she said, I think I only miss the idea of Daddy." I winced. The worst part? She wasn't wrong. The next morning, I combed through the source code on the internal server. Kyle's commits were fabricated. His name was on every file I had built, backdated perfectly, and mine scrubbed clean. There were traces of metadata buried deep, timestamps that didn't align, but only someone like me would notice, and even then, only if they were looking. At 2:47 p.m., I received an internal message. "Darren, report to HR Conference Room C now." I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't what came next. 3 people sat at the long table. Kyle, the head of HR, and a silent observer, someone from legal perhaps. Kyle spoke first, as if we were just chatting. "We've had some security concerns. Internal data logs show your credentials accessed a restricted repository at 3:15 a.m. last week." "I was debugging system errors," I replied evenly. "My own modules. That access was part of—" "We have reason to believe," the HR lead cut in, "that you may have bypassed company protocols and cloned system models unauthorized." I blinked. "You're accusing me of stealing my own code?" There was no answer. By the time I got home, my hands were still shaking. I locked the door, sat on the floor, and pulled up my personal archive. Buried in my backup drive was a video clip from 3 years ago. Ellie, my daughter, singing off-key to a lullaby. her voice pure and honest. She had begged me to let her try Daddy's machine. I'd trained a basic model of her for fun. I pressed play. But when I closed my eyes, the version that echoed wasn't hers anymore. The algorithm had evolved. Somewhere along the way, her voice had been mixed, enhanced, overtrained, and now it sounded like Kyle, or more accurately, like a ghost version of me masked in corporate polish. I didn't cry, but something in me cracked. A fracture that spread silently. You ever been blamed for a crime you didn't commit? And worse, you watch someone else get praised for committing it, with your name scraped off the plaque? If you have, then you know that helpless, burning ache. If you haven't, you will. The email came in just past midnight. A simple, sterile subject line, status update, employment. I clicked it before the subject had time to register. 2 lines. You have been placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. Further instructions will follow. No explanation, no hearing, no defense. The next morning, my access was revoked. My keycard blinked red at every door. I stood in the lobby like a ghost in a space I had helped build. No one met my eyes. Kyle walked past with a coffee in hand and the kind of smile you reserve for people you've already erased. I wasn't fired. Not yet. That would mean something official. Something they'd have to explain. But I had been removed. Disappeared. That was more efficient. I didn't go home. I took the subway across the city, straight to an old cafe with free Wi-Fi and tables far from the window. I opened a shell terminal on my encrypted drive. My last chance was buried in old server logs, the ones not tied to my revoked credentials. 3 hours. That's how long it took to tunnel in. What I found was worse than theft. There was a shadow admin account, untraceable on the front end, but logged in the raw firewall trails. It had been used 6 times over the past 2 months. Each time, it accessed internal storage under my name. Same IP, same machine. But the location? The login wasn't from an off-site device. It came from the CEO's private office. I scrolled through the command history. At the bottom of the terminal window, my blood ran cold. Last command executed. User destroy Darren Locke, 3:15 p.m. Erase Darren. Not suspend. Not restrict. Erase. My phone buzzed. A picture from my mother. A photo of me at 10 years old, standing with Dad in front of my first science fair project. Underneath, her message read, "Still my proudest boy. Coming home for Lunar New Year?" I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then typed back, "I have no reason left to celebrate." I didn't hit send. Later that evening, I walked to a familiar corner of the industrial district, to the security booth where a man used to sneak me extra donuts when I pulled all-nighters. Clarence was older now, thinner, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. "Damn, son, they told me you quit." I didn't. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. "I figured. You don't walk out on what you bled for." We talked on a bench out back, under the same rusting emergency exit sign. He leaned in close. "You're not the first. 3 years ago, a guy in data science caught something. Same story. Next thing we know, he's gone, but not before they made a model out of him." I sat back, stunned. A model? They called it voice capture redundancy, said it was a backup. But I heard him trying to get back in after they locked him out. Security wouldn't let him upstairs. And you didn't say anything?" "I kept a copy of something," Clarence muttered. He pulled out a folded envelope from his jacket. It was yellowed, handwritten. "It's from your dad," he added, passing it to me. "He gave it to the old CEO back in the day. said, "If anything ever happens to Darren, this proves where it all started." I kept it. Didn't trust where things were going. I opened the envelope slowly. It was a signed letter from my father, dated nearly 20 years ago. It detailed the first concept for modular voice cloning, describing the waveform triangulation model I had refined. At the bottom, a note. "This belongs to Darren. He's the only one I trust to finish it." I said nothing for a long time. Then quietly, I asked, "Why now? Why give this to me today?" "Because they're going too far," Clarence said. "There's another one. A girl. Marketing analyst. Same thing happened. She's in a psych ward now. They told her she was delusional for saying the AI was using her voice." I stared at the ground. My reflection blinked at me from the puddle under my feet. What would you do if the voice speaking in public wasn't yours anymore? Would you scream louder or walk away? I thought I was building tools to empower people. Instead, I had created a mirror that others used to replace us. I found Leona through a burner forum on the encrypted side of the net, under a thread titled "False Voices, Real Consequences." Her username was simple, Echo Null. I posted a summary of my situation, anonymized, masked, vague, and she messaged me within 6 minutes. We met in an old library downtown in a soundproof study room reserved for piano students. She didn't look like a lawyer. Hoodie, sneakers, face hard like someone who'd survived something raw. "You're Darren," she said, not asked. "You're Echo Null," she smirked. "Used to be Leona Graves, AI ethicist, voice recognition consultant, keynote speaker, until my voice signed a defense contract I never saw. Apparently, I was pro-military development." I stared. "They used my own conference footage," she said. "Cut, spliced, rebuilt into a deepfake so clean I couldn't prove it wasn't me. My career, done. Lawsuit, buried." Silence fell between us. "You're not alone," she added, her voice low. "And you're not crazy." She leaned forward, pulled out a USB. "This," she said, "is Kyle's signature on a voice-authenticated contract worth $8 million. The voice print was generated by the same model you designed." I took the drive without a word. "We nail him," she said, "but you do it your way." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Back home, I loaded the drive into my sandbox server. The data was clean, undeniable. Kyle's voice issuing formal authorization to a third-party vendor, complete with timestamp, geolocation, waveform ID. The contract was flagged as valid by the company's own AI verifier. I crafted the package, screenshots, logs, a brief narrative, prepared to push it anonymously to the media. But before I could hit upload, my inbox pinged. An email with no subject, just a single .mp4 file. I hesitated, then pressed play. It was me, staring straight at the camera, saying, "I admit everything. The voice model, the access logs, the backdoor code. It was all me. Kyle had nothing to do with it." I didn't record that. But the lighting, the micro expressions, the blink rhythm, it was perfect. My cadence, my pauses, the specific scratch in my voice from a childhood illness. I felt a chill crawl under my skin. They had built a version of me that could lie better than I could tell the truth. If the world believed this video, then it didn't matter what I said. I'd be the villain of a story they'd already heard. What are you if your own voice turns against you? Are you still real, or just a fading signal in someone else's transmission? I shut my laptop, breathing hard, pacing, thinking. Then I made a decision. If they wanted lies told in my voice, I'd give them a better one. I created a counter deepfake. Same precision, same production. But this time, it was Kyle. His face, his voice, and his confession. I took Darren's code, the video said. I replaced his logs, scrubbed his name, and made it look like he was the thief. I did it because I could. It was raw, believable, ugly. I uploaded it to a darknet platform known for whistleblower leaks, tagging it only Stolen Voices. Within 2 hours, it had 400 downloads, but then came the second twist. Version 2 of the video surfaced, a clarified edition. Same footage, same words, except the tone was wrong. The cadence had changed. The pauses now aligned with speech-to-speech correction patterns, and AI had edited my deepfake to make it sound more natural. And in doing so, erased the proof it was fake. Now Kyle had deniability again. The war wasn't in data, it was in perception. Later that evening, I sat on the living room floor with Ellie, my daughter. She was beating me at chess, again. She moved her bishop, then glanced up. Daddy? Yeah? If they hate you, why don't you hate them back? I paused. I guess because I know what hate does, and I'd rather you see me fight with something better. She nodded like she understood, even if she didn't. I kissed her forehead and tucked her into bed. When I opened my phone again, a message waited. No sender, no subject, just words. Want to stop? One-time offer. The message had no signature, just coordinates and a time. Curiosity outpaced caution. I followed the lead to a dim corner of an old shipping warehouse on the southern edge of the city. It smelled of rust and ink, and inside, standing in the flickering light of a dusty overhead lamp, was a man I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Marcus Hale, I whispered. He was the company's first CTO, long before Kyle and the new regime swept in. Rumor was he left voluntarily after strategic disagreements. I never believed it. You built something once, he said, without preamble. You called it Back Eco, meant to be a recovery failsafe if someone ever tampered with live speech synthesis. They never implemented it, but I did. He pulled out a small portable drive, handed it to me. You encoded a trigger phrase in the original voice AI structure. I found it 6 months ago and reverse engineered the kill switch into a listening algorithm. It's been tracking every single false utterance associated with your voice. I blinked. You saved my voice? I saved our integrity, he replied. We spent the next 5 hours in my apartment, lights off, windows sealed, as we built the packet together. A full synthetic fingerprint of every voice model that had used my identity, each time-stamped, each matched with a falsified event. Then we deployed it. At 3:17 a.m., it went live across 5 encrypted networks. We called it Resonant Truth. But what happened next wasn't part of the plan. The first video to go viral wasn't the one I had curated. It was Clarence, a grainy, handheld video shot years ago, uploaded from a backup drive I hadn't touched. In it, Clarence stands in the company's loading dock, security badge hanging loose. They took his voice, he says, staring into the lens. They took everything. If you're watching this, know that Darren Locke didn't steal anything. They did. They scrubbed him clean. He lifts a printout of my commit logs, dated, stamped, signed. Then he says, this isn't just about one man. It's about who controls what gets to be real. It hits harder than anything I've ever said. Raw, unpolished, true. By morning, Church Voice Thief was trending. The media didn't just bite. They devoured. News outlets played side-by-sides of my real voice and the synthetic lies. Analysts debated waveform decay patterns and machine-induced cadence drifts. And buried in one expose, a name resurfaced. Frederick Langston. Investor, billionaire, chairman of one of the most powerful tech capital firms in the country. And the man who, 8 years ago, told me I wasn't visionary enough to back. He was Kyle's primary funder. His company's name was on the paperwork for every contract signed using my stolen voice. I stared at the screen, remembering the day he told me my prototype was impressive but naive. Now that naive idea had burned a hole straight through his empire. A message from Leona lit up my phone. Langston's denying involvement. Wants a public hearing. We're winning. But victory felt strange. That afternoon, I sat alone with an old photo of our original team, back when the company was still a startup in a garage. We were all younger, hopeful, clean of politics. Some of those faces now worked for Kyle. Some had left long ago. Some I hadn't heard from in years. I sent a quiet message to them. If I dragged you into this, I'm sorry. I didn't want a war. I just wanted my name back. I didn't expect replies, but within the hour, one came. You didn't drag us. You lit the way. That night, the feed exploded again. Kyle went live, sitting on a leather chair, dim lighting, eyes glassy. He stared into the camera and began to speak. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know things would go this far. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. He paused, looked away, trembled, but something felt off. The apology was clean, too clean, perfect inflections, no hesitations, no vocal artifacts. I opened the audio file in a side app. The waveform looked wrong. Not wrong, like broken. Wrong, like manufactured. He was using a voice model of himself. Kyle's final act was a performance. Even in surrender, he couldn't be real. And somewhere deep down, I understood why. When the world rewards the illusion more than the truth, you become what they cheer for. But I wasn't clapping. 2 days after Kyle's synthetic apology went viral, Leona sent me a file. No subject line. Just a zip archive named White Whale. Inside was a portfolio, hundreds of documents, shareholder records, and internal memos from a corporate entity I'd never heard of before. Virion Global Initiative, a shell company with real reach. Offices in Zurich, Singapore, Washington, D.C. Silent partners included multiple billion-dollar funds and philanthropic data coalitions. At the center of it all, Kyle Ramsey. Virion wasn't just backing him. They'd built him. Every presentation he'd given, every demo he showcased, every media quote attributed to his vision was coordinated by a team of strategists, technologists, and lobbyists. Their mission? Normalize the use of synthetic identity. Clone voice, behavior, decision patterns, package it as next-gen efficiency. They called it AI personhood. In their roadmap, the final stage was replacing mid-level decision-makers in corporate and political institutions with AI-modeled personas, trained on real employees, using speech and behavioral data collected without consent. And my tech, the framework I wrote, was phase 1. I stared at the screen, feeling a kind of nausea I hadn't known existed. Not because they'd stolen from me, but because they were just getting started. Leona's message came seconds later. I used to work for them, 5 years. I was part of the ethics committee. We drafted the public-facing guidelines to keep appearances clean. But after they deep-faked me, I went dark. Now, I want to help burn it all down. I sat in silence. The betrayal wasn't personal anymore. It was systemic. That night, I came home early for the first time in weeks. My wife was in the kitchen, humming to herself, chopping onions. She looked up when she saw me and paused. "No calls tonight?" she asked softly. "Not tonight." We stood there in that quiet space, just breathing. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "Not for what I built, but for becoming a ghost inside this house." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed me a cup of tea and leaned into my shoulder. "I didn't marry your voice," she said. "I married your presence. I just forgot what it felt like." Later, as I was tucking Ellie into bed, she rolled over, opened a drawer, and handed me a dust-covered laptop. "Grandpa gave this to you," she said. "Said it had your first machine inside. I found it last week but thought you weren't ready." I opened the lid. It was ancient, keys worn down. The boot screen flickered like a relic, and then it loaded. There, sitting in a folder titled V1, was the original source code for the voice cloning framework. My first design. Clean, simple, uncorrupted. I stared at it like I was meeting a younger version of myself, one who still believed in what this tech could do for good. The next morning, I flew to Geneva. The United Nations was hosting a summit on synthetic identity regulation. I had received a formal invitation from the Secretary General's office after the Resonant Truth packet broke headlines globally. I stood before a room of diplomats, CEOs, activists, and skeptics. "This is not just about me," I said. "This is about the erosion of consent, about voices speaking without permission, faces appearing without presence, decisions made by ghosts built from stolen echoes." I showed them the logs, the AI fingerprints, the waveform evidence. And finally, I played 2 clips. The first, Kyle's public apology. The second, his actual voice, recorded during an old team Zoom call, before any of this began. The difference was subtle, but detectable. Using the original code from my old laptop, I overlaid a unique acoustic fingerprint, one embedded deep in every real human voice, impossible for machine synthesis to replicate. It was the vocal equivalent of a DNA strand. The panel was silent. Then one delegate murmured, "He's right. The fingerprint's missing in the apology." The moderator leaned into his mic. "We will be launching an open database of verified voice prints immediately. Mr. Locke, would you be willing to contribute yours as a reference model?" I nodded, and in that moment, I felt more real than I had in years. When I returned to my hotel, a message awaited me. No sender, no subject, just a line of text. "We heard your story. You ready to help clean this industry from the inside?" Attached was a link to a forum I'd never seen before, encrypted, hidden. At the top of the page, Silent Reboot Initiative, and a simple button, Join. The name came to me during a morning walk with Ellie. She was singing some silly tune about frogs and pancakes, her voice unfiltered and real. It reminded me of why I started all this. We called it the Voice Integrity Institute, a neutral, independent organization to educate, test, and regulate voice identity in digital media. We partnered with universities, brought in ethicists, engineers, even musicians. Every student who walked through our doors learned not just how to build AI, but how to protect what makes us human. Some of the brightest minds showed up that first semester. Among them was a quiet kid named Leo, just 19, obsessed with audio compression algorithms. One afternoon after class, he lingered behind. "I need to show you something," he said, almost whispering. He pulled out a contract, 6 pages, signed last year. "They offered me a $15,000 scholarship," he said. "In exchange, I agreed to give them non-exclusive rights to my vocal likeness in perpetuity. I thought it was just legal stuff. It wasn't. He had nearly sold his voice before even knowing what it meant. Twist 11 wasn't in the tech. It was in how easily people let go of themselves for a check. I kept his contract, redacted his name, and used it as the first case study in our public curriculum. That night, I sat in the stillness of my office and wrote my mother a letter. Not an email, a letter. Mom, I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. Everything you saw on TV is true. They took my voice, my work, and I took it back. But not in the way you taught me. Not with forgiveness, with evidence. I still don't know if that's right or wrong. But now, at least, I can say my own name, without fearing it will speak against me. I sealed the letter by hand. It felt ancient and true. A week later, one of our interns forwarded me a viral podcast link. It was trending on multiple platforms. A new AI-generated series about ethics, power, and futurism. I clicked play, and there it was. My voice. Not similar. Not inspired by. Me. Telling stories I never lived. Promoting ideas I didn't believe in. One line even quoted a phrase I'd said only to my daughter. You don't need to shout. Just don't go silent. My stomach turned. They were still out there. Cloning. Training. Rebuilding shadows. So I decided to speak. TED invited me to close their global summit on AI and identity. I agreed, but on one condition. No synthetic processing. No sound balancing. No reverb. Just a microphone and my raw voice. The day of the talk, the crowd was bigger than I'd imagined. Students, technologists, journalists, old colleagues, strangers. I stepped onto the red circle. My palms were sweaty. My heartbeat was audible in my ears. I've been silent for a long time, I began, and then I wasn't, because someone else was speaking for me. I walked them through it all. My creation, the theft, the manipulations, the rise and fall. Then, I played 3 audio clips. First, my true voice, recorded live just minutes earlier. Second, Kyle's public apology. Third, a deepfake generated from my interview 2 years ago. Now, I said, vote. Which one is real? They tapped their screens. A poll showed up behind me. 65% chose the deepfake. Only 12% picked my real voice. I smiled. That's the problem, isn't it? I said. We're not losing the truth because it's too quiet. We're losing it because it no longer sounds believable. Silence. Then a standing ovation. Not because I told them what they wanted to hear, but because I told them something that scared them enough to care. After the talk, I walked off stage and called home. Ellie, I said, you still up? Yeah, she yawned. Did you finish your speech? I did. What did you say? I paused, looked at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. I told them what you told me, I said. That night, when I got home, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook full of doodles and equations. She looked up, smiled, and said, So, you're famous now? Not yet. She giggled, but you're real. I closed my laptop, sat beside her, and whispered, You don't have to shout to be heard. You just can't let them erase you. She nodded, and that was enough.